I'm delighted to say Seánie Johnston is with us. Seánie, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, man. How are you?
We were saying and making the point that Cavan and Down in the Tailteann Cup is as big a game as there can be in the Tailteann Cup, really, because I think everybody expected one of these two teams to win it, and they haven't managed to avoid each other. They might both be regretting that, but this is about as good as it gets for the Tailteann Cup.
Yeah, it is, and I suppose from a Cavan perspective, if you're going to get down, you're better getting them now in a home quarter final. So bringing them to Breffni Park should be obviously be an advantage to Cavan. They've beaten them there already this year. But like, you'd expect this if the Tailteann Cup was, really, really well followed. You'd expect this to be a big crowd, but I think there was a very small crowd in Newry and Park Esther for Down and Longford. So I don't know how much of a crowd Down are going to bring to it, but as far as the Tailteann Cup goes, this is as good as it's going to get. You're expecting one of the winners to come from this. Meath will obviously have a say. I know they pipped Down there a week or two ago, but I think the winners will come from this quarter final.
Tell me, has this been accepted as the be all and end all for Cavan inter-county football this year? Has it captured the imagination of football followers in Cavan?
No, I don't think it has. I think there was a real hope. I know from speaking on the show before that Cavan would beat Armagh in the first round of the championship in Breffni. I think Cavan followers thought that they're after winning Division 3. They had a very good second half performance against Fermanagh in the league final, that they would give Armagh a real game and hope to get through that game. And then you're looking at playing a Down or Donegal, and Donegal weren't going great at the time, and Down ended up turning them over. So you'd be looking at Down in the semi-final and a potential route to an Ulster final to get you in to compete for the Sam Maguire. So but for the Cavan, the Cavan setup, this game is now huge, because the big carrot of the Tailteann Cup is that Cavan don't need to worry about league status. Obviously they'll look to go and have a really good Division 2 next year and potentially get up to Division 1, which is where they want to be. But the carrot is like Westmeath to get straight into the Sam Maguire next year and be playing against the big guns all the time.
The Down setup is interesting as well, Seánie, and we were speaking during the week, like Conor Laverty and his assistant Mickey Donnelly was speaking about it. The fringe players in the Down panel, essentially, if you're not in the, say, first 18, 19 sort of players, they're being released back to their clubs in the last couple of weeks, even to play 30, 40 minutes of a game. What do you make of this? It seems like common sense, I suppose.
I love it, to be honest. You look at yourself, you put yourself in that player's perspective. If you're 19 or 20, or even if you're 22, 23, and like the player, I always say the player always knows. You can have an idea in your head or a really, really positive attitude. I might get game time. But at the end of the day, most players are fairly realistic. They know where they're at in the grand scheme of things. They know if they're likely to get 5 minutes or 40 minutes or no minutes. And I just think it's such a good and novel idea by the Down management, because if you want an impact off the bench, you're far more likely to get it than from someone that's coming in more than likely with a little bit of confidence after playing decently with their club. Obviously, the standard of club football, the county football, is a good bit different. It's certainly reduced. So you're coming in off probably having a decent performance. You're back playing with the people that you've grown up with. You're coming in better attitude, better, just happier really, because the county setup, if you're not playing, can be really demanding on players physically and mentally. Obviously physically it's difficult with the amount of training and so on, but even mentally, you put yourself in an environment, a really high performance environment. You want to get the best out of yourself. You want to be getting game time, and if you're not getting it, it can become really, really tough. So just being released back to the club to play X amount of minutes, it's twofold. It's getting you that confidence. It's also getting you more game time. That means that if you're going to be asked to come in to a real pressurised environment, you're more likely to be more ready.
Presumably as a player you would have liked this whole setup, games week to week as opposed to training sessions. That seems to be the general consensus, that players like matches.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It just the fear on the Monday or the Tuesday night when you have a 3-week break is just, you wake up at whatever time, 7 a.m, until you arrive to the Breffni Park or wherever, you're just going, oh, what could this entail? This could be anything if we have a 3-week break. Is there going to be running sessions? What are we going to be doing? So at least if you know week on week, you know it's going to be more tactical, more technical, working on skill set, working on positional stuff, working on kickouts. It's not going to be too taxing on the body. So yeah, week on week is nice. But obviously the downside of it is, boys, if you get any type of niggle, you're potentially missing. If you pull up there during the week, you're potentially missing a full route. If you pull a hamstring or something like that, it's hard to get back now.
I was just looking back at the result from the first round of the Ulster Championship that you were talking about, the Cavan Armagh game. It was back in April. It feels like a different world. It feels like the sport is different when the weather is good. I've been talking a little bit about this over the last few months, that like the competition starts in one season and it's finishing, let's wait and see what the weather's like this weekend and over the next couple of weeks. But I'm hopeful that the bad football is over and the good football is about to begin.
Just you've great optimism. Look, it is. I think it's been a lot of shadow boxing, you can say, over the last couple of weeks. Now you're coming into, there's a lot of matches that are do or die in some of the group stages that people need results. There's still a place or two up for grabs in terms of preliminary quarterfinals. You're seeing some of the big teams not guaranteed to be in the top two. Which obviously second and third is a world of difference, because you know what I mean. If you're finishing third in a group and you draw Kerry and Killarney, now obviously that duck has been broken by Mayo going down there, but it's a really, really tough draw. So you're hoping that with improved conditions, that turnovers will be less, but that just means that teams are potentially going to sit in more and make teams try and break them down, and that's what we've been seeing over the last couple of weeks. So there's been a lot of possession-based football. I don't see that it's going to change really just because the conditions have changed. Okay.
In terms of the hierarchy of where teams are and how they're performing at the moment, nobody has yet really laid down a marker and said we're the best team in the country by far or clearly, and I think that's also a good thing in terms of there being a sense of us not knowing exactly what's going to happen, whereas in previous years we were basically penciling Dublin +1 into an All-Ireland final and saying they're the only two teams who could make it that far.
Absolutely. I think that's great. You know what I mean? As you said, let's go back to, I think in 2012, Mayo beat Dublin in a semi-final. So from there, you're looking at 10 years where you're looking at Dublin nearly getting to every final. I know they got pipped last year, but it's novel, it's new. There's a lot of teams with new hope. Like you're looking at Galway seem to have their ship really well in order. At the minute, they're probably looking the most likely. Mayo went to Kerry and won. Kerry aren't going well, but they're going to come back with a kick to win this weekend. They'll have a home quarter final. You'd expect them to be in the semi-final then. Tyrone had a good win against Armagh. Armagh will still see themselves as contenders if they can get something out of this weekend, which will be tough for them, but they're more than likely still going to be in a quarter final. They could end up going to Killarney. So I think over the next couple of weeks you're going to see a lot of the heavyweights coming against each other in a heavyweight environment, where if you get knocked out you're gone. Where over the last couple of weeks you had a couple of heavyweights, but they knew they had a rematch clause or whatever you want to call it, that they had another opportunity of getting back into the fold. So that's why it makes it exciting. The next 5-6 weeks there's going to be some big heavyweight battles.
I think you called at the start of the championship when we had Seánie, you called Mayo, wasn't it, to win the All-Ireland, and I suppose they haven't done much to dissuade you since. The Kerry performance was brilliant, and the live game, as Tommy was saying yesterday in the power rankings, if Louth haven't scored that 1-1 in injury time, they win that game by 4 or 5 points, and that's it. Do you still stand by Mayo for the All-Ireland?
Well, I kind of have to, yeah. And they're looking strong. When you look at the Mayo bench, it was the same against Kerry. I think they brought on Durkin, they brought on Hession, they brought on Fionn McDonagh, they brought on Tommy Conroy. So they're doing probably what they haven't done before, where they're kind of holding these boys in reserve and going, okay, with 20-25 minutes to go, we're going to bring on real power, real pace in Conroy, Hession, Durkin. Fionn McDonagh can play, can kick a point. I think he kicked a point when he came on the last day as well. So they're doing what all the best teams that have won All-Ireland, you look at the Dublins, where they were able to introduce people off the bench that are going to make a difference. Now, I don't know, Kevin McStay will only notice, we're not privy to what's going on in Mayo training. Maybe these boys aren't performing well enough to start. Who knows? But they're definitely household names in terms of Conroy, Durkin especially. Hession's a really good player. we saw that goal that he scored in the league this year. He's really, really high skill set, and he's a good defender. He's a good man marker as well. So they have real options off the bench now, which gives them a real chance.
Strength and depth is a crucial thing, Seánie, isn't it? Like, we were making the point yesterday, like, say Derry lose a Shane McGuigan to injury, touch wood,
and then they're gone.
Then they're like, and Armagh could be something similar maybe with Rian O'Neill. Like, you look around and you try and find a team that actually wouldn't suffer with a big injury or two. There aren't many, but Galway have more strength and depth, for example, this year than they had last.
Well, they do, because they have Burke back and they have Peter Coote back, and then Tierney's a young lad who's really, really good player, and then you're adding in Walsh, and I think Comer came off the bench the other day and kicked 3 points, and he's obviously a big player for them. So there's 5 or 6 really, really, really good players straight away, and then they brought on Tom O'Culhan, who's a good player as well. So they have real depth, and that's only in the attacking sense. So you look at it's like anything. You mentioned Derry there, but at the minute, if you mention Kerry and you take Clifford out, they're going to really struggle as well. If you mention Dublin and you take O'Callaghan out, they're going to struggle as well. So there's a couple of really key players that you need to keep fit. Mayo have them too, Galway have them as well. That if you're down them, things are going to be a lot harder for you. But I just see with the likes of Mayo and Galway in particular now, they have such strength and depth. Like Comer's such a key player to them to go to Westmeath. Not in a must-win game, but knowing that Westmeath had a good performance the week before, and to bring Comer off the bench and he kicks 3 points. So Shane Walsh only kicked a point from play. So if you're looking at Westmeath and you're seeing that, you're really, really happy. If you were given that before the game, you take their hand off. And then Galway just have difference makers on the bench at the minute, which is probably it's definitely going to have a big effect later on down the line, you'd imagine.
News coming through in the last hour that, as it stands, Rian O'Neill has had his appeal against his red card turned down. Now I think they can still go further. I don't know which stage that was at, but the decision to enforce the 1-match suspension was upheld, according to Belfast Telegraph. So Armagh haven't clicked, and they're desperately looking for a performance out of nowhere, and not having Rian O'Neill is not going to help them.
No, it's definitely not. I'm looking at them early on in the year when they were out Rian O'Neill. They didn't have him in Breffni Park. He came on, he made that goal line clearance. But yeah, he's a loss to them, and he's a loss to them from dead balls as well, because Armagh are struggling really to score a huge amount. They kicked 11 points against Tyrone. They were pretty poor up front against Westmeath. They got that goal from Turbot. Turbot started the year like a house on fire. I think they need to stick with Turbot, to be honest, because he has quality. But the thing is, they missed a couple of really easy frees when Rian O'Neill wasn't on the field against Tyrone. And honestly, if you're not scoring that much, you have to find different ways to score, whether that be utilising the mark or utilising frees and winning frees at, say, the 45 metre line or 42 or 41 metres out, and having a really, really established free taker who is going to kick 80% of those 45 metre frees. And that is Rian O'Neill, and that gives you a chance in matches where if you're struggling to score and you're winning these frees and then you're missing them, it just drains the energy out of teams. Look, they're going to give Galway a game. Are they good enough to beat Galway? Like, they've played twice over the last year, and both games have been extremely, extremely tight. So there'll not be much in it. But you just look at the mindset of the two teams going in. Galway are probably on a crest of a wave, Connacht champions, 1 or 2 games. What does that do to their mindset? Yes, they're going in full of confidence. I'm thinking Galway are already through, but they'll want to top the group just to give them that extra week off. Armagh are going to have to come out all guns blazing, but it's just whether they can score enough to beat Galway. Okay,
the last thing I wanted to ask you about was the other group, Dublin, Sligo, Roscommon, Kildare. Basically, Roscommon need to beat Kildare well to stay, to give themselves a good chance of finishing top. Realistically, you'd expect Dublin to beat Sligo by enough for that match, in that match for them to finish top. But it's not beyond the bounds possibility that Roscommon do Kildare in this game, is it?
No, but I think Roscommon are a point ahead of Dublin at the minute, scoring wise. But Kildare have to win. Kildare have to get something out of this game. But the big thing now is for Kildare and Sligo, you have a decision to make if you're Tony McEntee. Let's be realistic. I'm all for optimism and anything can happen, but Sligo are not going to beat Dublin. Now it's, can Sligo contain Dublin in the hope that Roscommon outscore Kildare by 6, 7, 8 points, and it's whether Sligo can make a 70-minute game into where the ball is on the field for 70 minutes into where the ball is on the field for 42, 43 minutes, where, you know, they're trying to make things as slow as possible, contain Dublin, slow the game down, exactly like Roscommon did if they get possession, trying to keep it for as long as possible so that Dublin don't have the ball in their hand. Now, it's going to be difficult for them, and to have quality up front, Sligo, that's my worry for Sligo, is that they love to play. So they have Carabine, they have Murphy, they have Patrick O'Connor, Alan Riley come in and kicked 1-3 the last day, but they're going to need to be so tight defensively, and that's one thing that they're not really. But this is a big game for all four, because like I do feel getting that extra week allows bodies to come back. Like Dublin will want to top the group. I think Costello missed the last day with an ankle injury. You know, having that extra week is big for him. But it's also going to be big for Roscommon, because you don't know what you're going to pull out of the hat with a third place team. So you could get a really tough draw. Now, I know if Roscommon finish second, they'll be in the hide and they'll be confident of beating anyone there. But you could still get a really sticky draw. So topping the group is very, very important.
Realistically, who do you expect to finish top of this group?
Well, I expect Dublin to do enough to, like, Roscommon beat Sligo by 10. I know it was tied at half time. But if Sligo come and play, we've seen what happens if you try and come and play against Dublin with Louth. Now, obviously, I think it's in O'Connor Park, which is different to Croke Park. But you're expecting Dublin to win by 10 plus. Are Roscommon going to do that to Kildare? Kildare know they need to get something out of the game to get through. And look, going into the last game, Kildare were probably expecting that they'd be more or less true in the knowledge that Dublin had Sligo in the last game, and they didn't do their job in the first game to get over Sligo. And fair play to Sligo, I think they kicked the last 2 or 3 points in that game. But I expect Dublin to top the group, Roscommon to be second, and I think Kildare will probably get through in scoring difference.
Kildare have been pretty difficult to find the exact word, apart from disappointing in terms of how they've progressed this season, because there's been patches of good play. There's been moments in games where it looks like they've got a style and a bit of identity forming, and then the next game they go out and don't do anything like it, or even within the same match in the second half of matches, in a Sligo game in particular. So what's your assessment of where they are at the moment in their evolution?
Very hard to put your finger on it, isn't it? Like, you look at the Dublin game and you go, ooh, you know, this is a group that are all in, really. You know, it was which is what you expect, you know, a really committed, passionate, well organised, really put Dublin to the pin of their collars and looked like winning the game with 10 minutes to go. And then you're just going, okay, first round of the All-Ireland series, okay, we're away, that's fine, it's a difficult enough environment to go to Markovich Park, but just get in and get out of there with a win, and you're nearly guaranteed a place in the preliminary quarterfinals. And they didn't do that. And then you go and play Dublin again, and you know, it's a 9-point. It's very comprehensive, really. You know, it's not. There's games where Dublin you can keep them to 3-4 and then they'll pull away. It didn't really feel like that. It looked like Dublin were in fairly good enough control. And I know Cluxton pulled off a really good save at one stage from Dara Kerwin that could have tightened the gap a bit. But yeah, they're unknown really at the minute. Like, I think if you're honest and you're the other teams and they get through, you're looking to pull them out of the draw in the quarter final. That's where they're at, really.
Yeah.
Are there any teams, finally, Seánie, for me, just beyond that realm of teams we usually speak about? We spoke about Roscommon there, but you think of 2010, and we spoke about the madness of the 2010 All-Ireland there yesterday, and Cork and Down getting all the way to a final. Like, could the likes of Cork or Roscommon, or dare I say the Monaghan, be in serious contention here if they can build up a little bit of steam?
Yeah, I don't think they're Derry, I've said have a real chance, and Derry, that hasn't. I don't think they're as good now. I don't think they're going to be as good, but they still haven't lost. So they looked under pressure against Monaghan to pull that out. You know, they had a good win in Donegal, which is, no matter how Donegal are going, it's still not an easy place to go. They're going to be defensively sound. They're going to get goals still because of the way they play, and if they don't get goals, they're probably going to struggle. So they're still there. Like Cork, to me, Cork can trouble anyone, like we saw last weekend. You know, that decision with the Powder decision, I'm still looking at it a couple of times. I think Geaney has a run at him and kind of goes into him. It's a harsh enough call. So, you know, they're putting Kerry to the pin of their collar. Are Kerry going well at the minute? No, but Kerry are definitely All-Ireland contenders. So Cork can cause teams trouble because they can score and they can kick from distance, and they believe in themselves too, which is a massive factor. And if they can keep Powder fit and Hurley fit, then they'll cause people trouble. But you're still looking at, I think it's gone from the last 10 years, there was only three teams maybe that can win the All-Ireland. Now you're probably looking at 5 or 6, which is definitely a greater. But I don't see anyone really coming out of the pack to win it. They might beat someone in a one-off game, but I can't see them winning three games to win the All-Ireland.
Yeah. All right, Seánie, we leave it there. Good stuff. Thanks a million. Great to have you with us.
Thanks very much, man. Enjoy your